So, James.
So, Jordie.
So, week one of the Australian federal election campaign
It's begun, hasn't it?
has come to a close. And in week one, we had some slips, trips, falls, and bruised heads.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we did have some bruised heads, actually. That's a good one. Yeah.
So, it's not heap significant, but we had elbow slip over while on the campaign trail.
Yeah. Which, again, somehow makes headlines.
Yeah. We had Dutton kick a football into a reporter's head, split his head open.
Head open, yeah. Which, that's more headline worthy. That's akin to Scott Morrison's rugby tackling a 7-year-old child.
Correct. Yes.
Another classic from last election. Yeah.
The parallels there, hilarious.
Yeah.
However, we'd like to cut through some of the more kind of bravado.
Yeah, some of the sensationalist.
And spectacle.
Yeah, the spectacle.
And we'd like to talk a little bit more about the policies.
Yeah.
Because I would argue, actually now experience tells us, we have a video coming out soon this week, hopefully, where we went and interviewed some people on the street regarding the federal election, who they're voting for and why. Mm-hmm. And what became apparent to me is that people don't know who they're voting for, why they're voting, don't know about any of the policies, and don't even know there's a federal election coming up.
Don't know there's an election. That was the main one. Half the people we interviewed, there's an election. And this is before the election had been announced, by the way, but half the people we interviewed go, oh, mate, I'm from Victoria. And it's like, yeah, dude.
Part of Australia.
It's part of Australia.
Correct.
Federal election. Or state election. No, federal election. So most people, I think are quite indifferent.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the whole purpose of the election season.
Yes.
Is to, essentially just bombard you with enough propaganda from your party to instill in you a sense of fear to vote in the way that they want you to vote.
Correct.
Can we put it? That's a really kind of brutal way of putting it.
And look, I'd like to say here at Left Hook Media that we're not partisan. We have our own political preferences and choices.
We are called Left Hook Media.
No,
we're not called Right Hook Media.
However, what I'd like to say is that we try not to buy into the whole kind of idea of the uni party. Two sides of the same bird. Labor and Liberal exactly the same, because if you look at the policies, there are significant differences between them. However, there are areas of convergence and much similarity, which we obviously point out here at Left Hook Media.
Which we try to be equally critical. But that being said, if one option is far worse than another option, I would be biased if I didn't critique it more.
No, that's exactly right. So, James, let's discuss the two major parties.
Yes.
Because I think it's fair to say that while people may be inclined to vote for independents and smaller parties, whether that is One Nation or the Greens
or the trumpet of patriots,
or if you do have a local independent,
the saviour of the Australian nation, Clive Palmer's trumpet of patriots. Sorry.
Or whether you do have a local independent that you think's worthy and may actually win that seat, they are not going to decide who Prime Minister is, most likely. Mm-hmm. Well, hang on a sec, they might. But what I'm saying is that one of the two major parties will get in, and either Albo or Peter Dutton will be Prime Minister.
Yeah.
What's different about this election is that the increase in the presence of the independents and the Tills may be the deciding factor of who becomes the Prime Minister and who can form government.
Exactly. And we did see this, I think noticeably last election, there was a huge upsurge in votes for third parties.
Yes.
The likes of which had never been seen before. And I think it's most pollsters and pundits seem to be under the impression that this is only going to grow.
This is a radical shift, a permanent shift in the Australian political landscape.
Yep.
As you mentioned, more people now are voting for independents and third parties. Mm-hmm. There's been a significant drop in votes for the two major parties, a trend that is going to continue.
And also it's important to note that at the moment all polls are pretty much neck and neck. I've seen it 52-48 for Labor. I've seen it 51-49 for the Coalition. So obviously it looks like it's going to be close. So most people think that it's going to either have a minority government or a hung parliament.
Most likely a hung parliament at the moment, because
I tell you what, mate, if Peter Dutton gets in, there's not going to be much hung about that parliament. Sorry, terrible. Let's talk about the major parties.
Correct.
And their policies.
Please do. Yes.
Yeah. So should we start off with the incumbent ALP, Australian Labor Party?
Yes.
Currently in government, been in government for about 3 years after about a decade of coalition rule.
Yep.
Very tumultuous. In that decade, you had, 4 prime ministers, I believe?
Yes.
4. So, and they obviously kind of won on the back of that with Albanese. So they're essentially going in... The main issues that all parties are addressing, the main political wedges or the main things that are going to be political wedges this election season, the main one's going to be cost of living.
It's cost of living. That's what voters are saying.
Across all, and that kind of trumps everything else, essentially. Yep. So Labor are addressing the cost of living pressures by implementing the following. So I've just gone over and kind of read all their Labor and Liberals and their policies, for example. Tax cuts for all Australians, not just the top tax brackets. Energy bill relief in the form of $150 energy bill subsidy to all homes and some small business. Maintaining investment into renewables to reach our reduction goals of 82% by 2030 and unlock a further $8 billion in investment into the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. I'm really not sure how much a $150 energy bill subsidy will, how much of that will actually affect anyone. I guess any relief is better than no relief. Mm-hmm. They're also going to wipe 20% off of student debt and raise the repayment threshold and lowering repayment rates. Yeah. So that's one. It's good, as you've talked about before. Yep. That's a good one for you. It's probably a good one for me if it covers trade support loans as well.
It will.
Yep. Open an additional 50 urgent care clinics nationwide. Make the largest single investment into Medicare. Providing an additional 18 million bulk billed GP visits every year, which is also addresses cost of living pressures, and then further subsidising the pharmaceutical benefits scheme to lower the cost of prescription medications from $31.60 to $25. As we discussed, that is a big international trade kind of point of contention between the Trump administration and Australia.
And I think under the PBS subsidy, it's going to decrease the cost of medication for contraceptions and people dealing that need menopause treatment as well.
Yeah, because obviously when we think about cost of living, obviously one aspect that we have to look at is wage growth and people's wages, the amount they get paid. Yeah. But it's also the amount that you get paid in regards to what it costs you to live, for example.
And buy medicine.
Yes. So, for example,
see
things
a doctor.
Like medicine, education, obviously housing and rent, they're big issues as well. But obviously if your wage is only going up fractionally, which, our wages still are growing, but it's not, there hasn't been any huge insane way.
At 2 to 4% and inflation's at 6%, it's still 2% worse off.
And of course, if the kind of corporate overlords that rule every aspect of your life and dictate your existence all need to keep making more money and they further increase their profits, then all they can do is hike up prices for their services, which leaves you with less money at the end of the day.
Yes.
These are cost of living pressures.
Yes.
So if the energy companies need to make more money, they're going to charge you more for energy. You then have less money to spend on goods and services and to save. Same with fuel, same with medicine, for example. So these are all the ways they're looking at addressing cost of living kind of issues. Make free TAFE a permanent fixture. That will allow wide access to training, creating a more skilled workforce, build more childcare centres across Australia, guarantee eligibility for 3 days of subsidised childcare a week, and also build an additional 1.2 million homes to increase housing supply, expand the Help to Buy program, and introduce a 2-year ban on foreign investors buying new homes. That's really important, especially the childcare one. I think childcare is about $300 a day in Australia. So again, if you can get your childcare paid for, not only does that save you potentially 3 days, $900, but it also allows for one parent, an additional parent, to go back and enter the workforce.
Yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? It allows people to be able to work longer hours, not have their work week disrupted, and to have some sort of relief for their childcare payments.
And not to sound like one of those kind of like trad Aryan far right bros, but it's like, look, ideally, it would be really nice if one parent could work and have enough money that the other parent could raise a child, whether that's the male or the female. I don't really care, but that would be a really nice thing. But unfortunately, capitalism doesn't work that way. You both need to work to sustain a living.
Correct.
And therefore, if you're paying $900 a week in childcare, that is like a significant chunk of your wage. Just wanted to point that out. And they obviously are... part of their whole kind of wider vision is the Made in Australia, which is the future Made in Australia. So it's increasing money in like renewable investment, energy investment, and industrial investment in Australia to create a more self-sufficient Australia for the next kind of generation.
Yeah, and manufacturing jobs here in Australia that'll also be unionised as well.
Yes, and for that, I guess that's kind of where the TAFE and the childcare comes into it, because you need to have more access to vocational education for more people, which then lowers the necessity for skilled labour. Yeah. And therefore lowers for all the racists out there, less immigration.
Yeah, and unlike Trump's tariffs, I think this is a really broad spectrum policy proposal and an attempt to actually, as you said, subsidise skills, get people going to TAFE, allow families to have their kids go to childcare at a subsidised rate, upskill, and then get good jobs.
Yeah, and it does kind of follow, I think, kind of the history of the Labor Party, where it's like really nothing exciting, but it's just like, look, you just have we have an understanding of the government, of the issues that we need to develop. We have a vision for the future, so it's going to be slowly implementing policies. Nothing, no flash, no bang, but just things that will push the machine forwards.
As you said, James, I personally think the ALP should change their slogan to nothing interesting, structurally significant.
Yeah, perfect.
No, I really
do. No, I really do. Fortunately for them, like, the LNP has somehow managed to be even less.
Well, their slogan
should be more boring somehow.
But not almost. But their slogan should almost be really interesting, structurally deficient.
Yes, of course. Deficient in many, many ways.
So that's a good broad overview of the ALP. Honestly, I do think there are some really significant policies there.
And I think to maintain, for example, the quality of life that people our age have in Australia, that's because of the opportunities that were afforded to our parents.
Yeah.
So in order for, which we don't really have in the same way anymore. Yeah. So the way I see it is in order for our children to have a comparable quality of life, which is some of the best in the world in Australia. Yeah. The time is now to essentially build the future for the country and the future for them. And we can't do it the way we did it 30, 40 years ago. We have to do it different methods, and you have to implement these bigger visions for the country.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
Now, again, not Labor shields, plenty of criticism of Labor, but purely from an electoral point of view, that's... I can't critique any of that too much.
Correct. And obviously, some policies there to address the housing crisis. Yeah. I think we should point out that when Bill Shorten went to the 2019 federal election, he tried to really address the housing crisis by capping negative gearing and taxing capital gains.
Yes.
Got annihilated. They ran a scare campaign that Labor was going to increase your taxes, take your house, etc., etc.
Bunch of communists going to take your property.
Labor Party have learned from that. They were probably scarred from it and traumatised from it.
I think so, yeah.
This time around, they are...
Especially because they lost to Scott Morrison. Like, no one wants that guy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it was a bad one, man.
So the policies this time to address housing are the Help to Buy, where the government, from my understanding, goes in with your mortgage and I think purchases your mortgage and then sells it to you at a lower rate, and they get some of the equity for it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're kind of screwed because our economy is that built on housing prices continually going up that you can't just sign a decree and just say, all right, take 30% of all housing prices. Like, the economy will just collapse. Like, shit will go haywire. So you have to kind of address it in these small, more minute ways, for example.
And the HAF, which is the Housing Australia Future Fund, I believe, is it's a supply policy. So it's going to help build more social and public housing. This is housing for people in serious need. So this is elderly pensioners that can't afford to live in the private rental market. This is for women fleeing domestic and abusive relationships. This is for people with severe disabilities or other ills that prevent them from being in the private rental market or purchasing a house. Yeah. So,
And as astronomical, as eye-watering as house prices are in Australia, we actually still spend far less than many other countries in the world, in Europe. Countries like, everyone talks about Norway. Norway is just this mythical land where the government taxes the oil companies and everyone gets free school. Yeah, but then they spend like an extra 10% of their income on accommodation, essentially. Yeah. So it could be worse. I'm not excusing it. It's not great. If you want to buy a house, you're in a bit of a pickle, but... It's still doable, and it could be a lot worse, essentially.
So that's basically the Labor Party. Let's move on to
the LNP
coalition.
The coalition, LNP, headed by Peter Dutton. Again, possibly one of the most unappealing human beings in existence.
And that's honestly, that is not being partisan. That is an objective fact.
That's an objective fact. Yeah. I'll put it this way. Like, Trump has appeal to me.
Yeah, he does.
Trump, there's something about him that appeals. Peter Dutton there's just nothing appealing about the man. If he had like
James, that's what's so appealing about him.
Oh, you say that. I don't know who he's appealing to. Far out.
Anyway, so the LNP, what are their major policies?
So they're kind of addressing the same issues, but just look, you go on their website and you see they kind of advertise the policies and their platform.
Mm-hmm.
A lot less there. I'm not being partisan. I'm just saying there's like a lot less actual information there to look at.
Mm-hmm. In true LNP fashion.
True LNP fashion, yeah. So essentially, they're claiming that the inflation facing Australians is due to an excess of government spending.
Yep.
Promising to rein in excess spending, reduce government regulation, lower taxes, and deliver more affordable, reliable energy.
Yeah.
But that's it. Like, there's no real details. They just have the slogan. Like, I'm being serious. There's not actually much more there. So I'll break it down a little bit more.
So my understanding is that they've said they will match the $80 billion investment. Sorry, $8 billion investment into Medicare.
Yeah.
They will also match the PBS subsidy for medicine.
Yeah.
That Labor has proposed.
Yes, has proposed. So in response to Labor's proposed the elections...
They sit there and just say, we'll match it.
We'll match it, essentially. Yeah. So Labor says, we'll do this the election, and the LNP goes, we'll do it
because they know that if this becomes an election on health and Medicare, they will lose it. If they get wedged on that issue.
Absolutely.
So they sit back, let Labor put forward the policies, and then just say, we'll match it.
But also, in all seriousness, if the PBS is on the chopping block... in order to avoid Trump's tariffs, I would not be surprised if Peter Dutton cut that, because he's already come out and been like, "Oh, Albanese, you haven't been kissing the ring."
Yeah,
and as we discussed, the tariffs are actually not that significant overall.
Yeah,
obviously there is significance to them, but not as much. So again, they also. So under Labor, we've had a federal budget surplus last year, and that's in a shit economy, despite over a decade of coalition deficits. When the global economy was booming, and they were in power for like 10 years, and I don't think we had a single surplus.
No.
So just again, point to note. They don't say how they're going to lower taxes, whether the taxes will just trickle down, wink, wink, to the lower income Australians, or just be a continuation of current stage 3 tax cuts.
Yeah.
So that they're saying we're addressing energy costs by promising to deliver cheaper, consistent, cleaner power to Australians. This will be done by investing $660 billion into nuclear power, a scheme that we have already reported on here at Left Hook Media has been costed as not going to reduce energy prices. They're also talking about increasing gas production. Now, while increasing gas production will allow more energy into the market, as we know, the prices are set by the suppliers in Australia. And I think increasing gas supply will not lower the prices, personally, because the gas companies will make more money, still pay zero royalties, and we'll get nothing for it. And then they will probably just, hike up the prices anyway, because why not?
And increasing gas supply is going to take a long time. If you subsidise the gas industry and want them to do more offshore gas exploration, it's going to take years to happen. It's not going to happen next week.
Well, they already do get subsidised. They don't get taxed anything.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But what we really need is to have a domestic reservation of gas.
Yes.
Which I believe is part of this policy.
Not to my knowledge, it might be. I might have just been doing lackluster research. But
so they, from my understanding, said that they will secure a domestic reserve of gas.
Good on them.
Which can potentially help.
I'm in full support of that. Yep, absolutely.
It's not the worst policy, and I knew it was a good policy because I was listening to the ABC, as I often do.
Yeah.
And there was a spokesperson for the gas industry saying this was a really bad idea. And then my brain went, that must be a really good
idea. Capitalism, the logic.
Yeah.
So they've called it, the lack of housing supply and rising housing costs. They're blaming them on excessive bureaucracy and, of course...
Immigration.
immigration and union corruption. They have to throw a bit of union bashing there. Yep. It wouldn't be, LNP coalition marketing if they didn't try to bash unions along there somewhere along the line. Mm-hmm. They've also attacked Labor's proposed changes to negative gearing laws, and they claim that'll reduce investment and drive up rents.
Yep.
I believe we've covered Peter Dutton's extensive property portfolio.
Yes.
He's worth about $300 million, estimated. Mm-hmm. He's bought and sold, I believe, about $30 million of property in his lifetime. Mm-hmm. So we can safely assume that any cuts to negative gearing will hurt the Dutton family pocket, personally.
Yes.
And I don't believe in being like that reductive where you just say, oh, he owns a house, so obviously he's against housing. No, obviously there's other interests involved as well.
Yep.
And these people make a lot of money, but still always something to consider where the ideological alignment is. And they're also going to... so Australia's negative gearing laws are widely acknowledged as one of the main factors that has contributed to the housing crisis, so to speak. They're also going to implement a ban on foreign investors and temporary residences purchasing homes over the next 2 years, and reducing permanent migration and restricting the number of foreign students.
Yeah.
So this will probably have a negative impact on the economy.
Yep.
Large sections of our economy, specifically in cities, are based around the influx of foreign student capital, for example, which isn't going to be there forever. Lots of it was Chinese.
Yep.
That's not going to be there forever. However, I do find it funny. Obviously, they're running on the same kind of changes to immigration. So, you kind of foreigners buying houses, driving the price up, etc., etc.
I do think that is a good policy.
I think that's a good policy too.
A coalition initiative. They actually were the first ones to say that we should limit overseas investment into the housing industry.
Yes.
Have to support that.
Yeah, I have to support that. I did also, I'm recalling, my memory takes me back to about a week ago when I saw a video of Peter Dutton interviewing a wealthy Chinese donor. And he was saying, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was saying, look, we'll bring back like the millionaire visa. So if you're rich, you can just pay us, whatever it was. It's like $1 million and get the visa. And she was like, are you going to bring this back? And he was like, yeah, don't worry, we'll bring that back. This is a fundraising event.
Yeah, well, that's what Trump's done now.
Well, exactly.
They've got like the gold...
Yeah, the gold visa.
The gold visa. Where
Trump gold visa?
You could just buy a citizenship. And
amazing. Absolutely amazing. And they're also running on a more tough-on-crime approach to Labor, providing much needed leadership to tackle knife crime. Not sure about you. I don't think there's a knife crime epidemic in Australia.
Yep.
I think Australia is actually probably at the lowest, some of the lowest crime rates it has been, like nationwide. Obviously, there are certain areas. Northern Territory, Queensland, kind of some kind of like isolated suburban hotspots. Yeah. Obviously,
I don't think what's taken into account though is the fact that we also have an increasing population. Mm-hmm. So per capita, you're going to have an increase in crime as the population grows as well.
That is very true.
Yeah.
But again, usually when they have a policy, the media's kind of been tilling the soil, you know what I mean, to allow this, to give you traction in the public for these policies to stick. They haven't really been going on that one. Maybe they will. One thing they have said they're going to crack down on is the rise in anti-Semitism. And they are also promising to use the full extent of the law to crack down on protests, etc. So I can see this eventuating to look like Trump USA, where, you wave a Palestinian flag, you get deported to a prison in El Salvador.
Yes.
Again, I think that's kind of one of those... That's more of like a policy platform for the donors, not for the public. I don't think anyone really sees that unless you're a wealthy donor and you're like, that one's cool. So that's pretty much the most of it, man, on my side. Can you please enlighten me?
So what I would like to bring to attention is him drumming on about cutting public servants from the federal government.
Ooh.
The number started at 36,000, and this was apparently the number that Labor had hired since getting into power. And then that crept up to 41,000 last week. And then we saw Bridget McKenzie, our favourite sports minister, went on the ABC and said that this would include cuts to wasteful spending in the education department.
There you go.
And the health department, which I thought was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want to be specific. She just said that NAPLAN results had shown that, Australia's overall education had been receding. Therefore, we should
reduce funding?
Reduce funding then to the education department, federal education department. Course. Interesting. However, and this is, once again, completely omitted from the coalition's platform, is that these 36,000 jobs that were brought back in by the Labor Party weren't just new jobs. So these were jobs that had previously were hired to consultants.
Ah, of course.
What has come out now that in Morrison's last year, in 1 year, the coalition spent $20 billion on consultancies, equivalent to 54,000 full-time jobs in the public sector.
Well, there you go.
That was just in his last year.
Yeah.
And so the Conversation reported that first, a dramatic increase in government spending on consultancy had attracted attention. In Australia, it almost tripled between 1988 and 2016. And then tripled again to reach 3.2 billion Australian dollars for management advisory services alone in the year of 2023. So what has happened over the past 30 years is a massive privatisation of the bureaucracy, a outsourcing of the public sector to the private sector that does the same thing that the public sector does for a lot more money, and in some ways is not as efficient and helpful because it's not their job to run the government.
I feel like with consulting firms, it's the kind of thing where it's like, all right, we're going to pay you a bunch of money to solve this problem, and then they'll sit around and they go, oh, you know what the problem is? You need more consultants. And it's like, all right, it's like, yeah. I feel like that's kind of like, it's in the same way that not exclusively, but government solutions are usually going to be more government, more implementation or restructuring of bureaucracy. That's the way they think about it, about problems. Just the same way consultants are going to be like, you need more consultancies.
Yeah, and look,
lawyers are going to be like, you need more lawyers. Fridgies, you need more fridgies.
Correct.
Like, that's the way it goes. But these people also are member of a parasitic class.
Yeah, I'm not an advocate for huge government. Like, that's not what we're saying. But it shouldn't be privatised because at the end of the day, governments over decades, centuries learn unique skills, specific skills, how to run a bureaucracy. Once you hollow that out, those skills are lost. Consultancy firms don't have those skills. They haven't been in government. They haven't run a bureaucracy for 30, 40 years. What a consultancy firm wants to do is get a long-term contract where they can leech the government for its funds. Just like a weapon company does. Just why you need to increase defence spending, because we can sell you weapons for decades and we have that teat that we can keep milking indefinitely.
Yes.
That is the issue.
The public purse.
Correct.
Yes.
And increasing the amount of consultants increases our budget, increases our debt, and it de-skills the government. These are not good things. Sorry, this gets me a little bit... It almost gets me worked up because if we look at the PwC scandal, for those who don't know what the PwC scandal is, I don't blame you. It's one of those stories where your eyes just start to roll into the back of your head when you listen to it. Because what happened was the government under Morrison was getting their tax policy written by one of the big four consultancy firms, a US consultancy firm, PwC. And what they were doing was they were building this tax policy which was given to the government to stop major corporations, multinational corporations, from
paying tax.
Not from paying tax. What happens? The policy, the policy they designed for the government was to get more tax from multinational corporations.
Oh yes,
was to make it more difficult for said corporations to get around our tax laws. And so they sold this to the government, this policy. They built it, and then when they sold it to the federal government, they then got the policy and sold it to multinationals and said, this is how you get around the federal government's tax laws. We made them. Here they are.
Yeah. It's like, all right, who's going to solve your problem? It's like, all right, we need to get a large multinational company to work out how large multinational companies can pay more. Like, just the conflict of interest
is massive. It's huge.
It's absurd. Dude.
Yeah. So that's what happens when you hire consultancy firms.
Yeah.
And then since Labor has gotten back into power, they have redirected $4.2 billion away from consultancy firms. So the point of my tangent
by all means,
is that cutting these 40,000 jobs isn't going to save the budget. It's just going to redirect spending towards consultancy firms.
Yes.
And increase these conflicts of interest.
Yeah. And look, I'm not gonna make too broad a sweeping statement, but I consider consultants almost akin to real estate developers.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that, yeah. And we've talked about this before. Anyway,
so, James, they're the two major parties.
Yes.
That is the uni party.
Yeah.
We should probably look at some of the other minor parties. What have you got for
so
us?
I've got a bit on the Greens as well.
Yeah.
The Greens obviously have been increasing their vote share over the last couple elections, as we've said, as more parties have as more voters have stepped away from the two major parties. Mm-hmm. And the Greens are kind of just have a completely a series of policy platforms that are just far more ambitious and broad than either of the two major parties. Lots of them I am nominally in support of. So, again, tackling the cost of living, which is all of the parties are going into it with this being their objective, is planning on increasing the tax base and national budget by $514 billion by introducing a 40% tax on corporations with over $100 million in turnover, introducing a 10% wealth tax on the net worth of Australia's 150 billionaires, and closing loopholes which allow fossil fuel exporters to pay $0 in royalties and taxes, and to tackle multinational tax avoidance. Huge fan of all those things.
Yep.
Personally, they want to make all GP visits free. They want to put dental care into Medicare. They want to set up 1,000 free clinics, invest $21.5 billion into bulk billing, and a bigger focus on harm reduction, and invest into improving the healthcare outcomes of Indigenous Australians. Yep. All things I'm a huge fan of. Further fund public transport and infrastructure and roll out nationwide 50-cent public transport fees. And that was implemented in Queensland, I believe, last year.
By the Labor government.
They got voted out of power. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, they've kept the 50-cent public transport because it's so popular.
Yep.
They want to wipe out student debt, make universities and TAFE completely free, and reduce the corporatisation of universities in Australia, which I thought you would probably appreciate.
Yeah, of course.
As we've discussed this before. Stop new coal and gas licences, expand publicly owned renewable energy, stop subsidising fossil fuel companies, and further subsidise solar and battery options for Australian homes. And they also want a ban on native forest logging and further protecting endangered species.
Yep.
Again, all things nominally I'm in favour of.
So
again, there's not as much like nitty gritty about the implementation of any of these policies, but as broad policy outcomes and objectives, they are all quite good.
So I guess opponents of the Greens or of these policies would say, well, that's all good. How are you going to pay for it?
Well, they did actually cover that because you would be expanding the tax base by $500 billion.
Okay.
So that is that's kind of the main thing of the money's there.
Yep.
It just needs to be utilised.
I guess opponents of that would say, well, if you tax all the billionaires, they're all going to leave the country.
That's fine by me.
No, but seriously.
No, they'll just wash it in the Caymans like they've always done.
That's right. Yeah. But I also thought that I'd point this out, and the reason I'm saying this because I heard this the other day, is that I believe the UK has, what was it? It was between 10 and 13 billionaires. Norway.
Really?
Yeah, but was it 10 to 13?
Oh, my goodness, that sounds shockingly low, to be honest.
It may have been billionaires, not millionaires.
Billionaires, yeah. All right, sorry, cool.
And then I'm pretty sure in Norway, they had more billionaires.
Yeah.
The reason I'm saying this is to make my point is that in Norway, they tax their billionaire class a lot more than they do in the United Kingdom, and they have more billionaires.
That's good.
Yes.
There you go. Well, again, just shows.
Yes.
Yeah. Look, I pay fuckload of tax, pardon my language, so they should pay their proportionate same amount of tax as myself. Increase workers' rights, implement pay rises for all workers, paid leave for casual workers, and looking at the implementation of a 4-day work week. All those things I think are good. Paid leave for casual workers, my honest opinion, I'm fully in support of workers' rights. My honest opinion is, well, that's the whole point of being casual.
Yeah. And the 4-day work week, I'm still very
4-day work
skeptical
week,
about.
I believe if you work in construction or physical trades,
impossible.
Good luck.
Yeah.
If you work in an office, go your hardest.
You can increase productivity over 4 days. You don't have to work the 5th. Yeah.
I've spoken to people that have office jobs about the specific thing. You lose about a day in productivity just noodling around. So, I'm fine with that. That's cool. And then, make all public education free, provide high-quality childcare, addressing First Nations learning. An interesting one, make supermarket price gouging illegal and look at ending the supermarket duopoly.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea, but that would be a project. That would be a gargantuan project.
It would be.
And
So
our entire food production system would have to be completely overwhelmed.
Correct.
It's a good idea.
Albanese did talk about this last week.
He did talk about
price gouging in the supermarket industry, and that they, I think, will look into. There was a report recently at a Senate. There was a Senate report, and they've looked into that, and I think they're going to take into consideration a lot of its recommendations.
Absolutely.
Trying to make the supermarket industry more competitive. And look, if you are pro-capitalist, monopolies are bad, duopolies are bad.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a very uncompetitive supermarket and food industry here in Australia.
It's pretty horrific, actually.
Yeah. I'm not saying have price controls.
Yeah.
But at least have some more competition.
I'm not saying have price controls. I'm not saying have price controls. No, of course. But look, overall, their policy platform, strengthen social services and poverty.
Okay.
So, again, all things I'm broadly in support of.
Yep.
Again, a bit less, not as detailed in some of, the kind of the nitty-gritty, the granular details, shall we say, but all things that I could nominally get behind.
Yeah.
As well as that, as well as the three main ones, you've got just an absolute, just a real of interesting cats.
I was going to ask you, did you look much into One Nation? Because
I didn't look into One
Nation. Before the podcast I was going to, but I did read it was like a social media post, just kind of summarising their points, and all I read was the word cut immigration.
Yes.
That was all I read.
Well, I think that's it. I don't think there's much more than cut immigration, to be completely honest. Appealing to all your suburban kind of racists out there. You've got Bob Katter's party. So they're another independent party. We'll just skim over a couple of them quickly. Bob Katter's party.
Jackie Lambie.
I'm not sure what Bob Katter's policies are, but I think everyone should go vote for him.
If you can.
100% do it.
You can't hate the man.
You can't hate the man. He's an icon. You've got the kind of the Teals. We can't forget to talk about the Teals.
Yeah. So liberals that like the environment.
Kind of a bunch of
represent some of the wealthier suburbs in the entirety of Australia, like Wentworth and other suburbs.
But they like the idea of social progressivism. So we want gays everywhere.
Yeah.
But I want a person of colour as my house servant serving me mimosas, whilst at the same time I'm increasing my capital by negatively gearing my 16 properties. So that's right, kind of how if that's a good representation.
Yeah.
Fatima Payman, who left the ALP.
Yes.
She has her own independent party that she's running on. I think their kind of main thing is, stop supporting Israel, which we can get behind, and also the construction of a state-owned bank. Which I thought was interesting.
Very fascinating. Good luck taking on the banking industry here in Australia.
Yeah, that's it. Head on. I know she's gone after the big dogs, isn't she? Israel and the banks.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's not winning.
No, definitely not.
And there's a few. There's David Pocock, for example.
So I was going to talk about David Pocock.
Please do.
He's the independent senator from the ACT, from Canberra. He is an interesting man. He is a former rugby player. Mm-hmm. Not the kind of person you expect to go into politics.
No, quite shocking.
And when you listen to him speak, you wouldn't think he was a rugby player.
No, that's very true.
He is quite articulate.
He's been getting a lot of traction online recently as well.
Heaps of traction online.
Yes.
He has teamed up with Punters Politics on social media to kind of, I guess, cut through to the younger generation and show that not all politicians are bought out or part of the duopoly.
Yeah.
He's interesting because he has been banging on about more openness in Australian politics, more accountability. He has been a vocal supporter of... let me reword that. He has been a vocal supporter of Palestine. He has vocally condemned Israel's actions, which I think is important to make the distinction, because you don't have to support a country and be nationalist towards them to just understand that what is happening to them is horrific and violating all the human rights.
Yeah. Supposed human rights.
Yeah. So he has been quite outspoken against Israel's actions. Mm-hmm. has also pushed against the gas cartels here in Australia.
I think he's got a lot of traction on that.
And what I think is really fascinating is that there is now a coalition behind him of some of the other independents. So Jackie Lambie, Senator Rex Patrick here from South Australia, they have all recently came together, and I think they had like a little press hearing in Canberra, and it was titled "The Gas Industry is Taking the Piss."
Yeah.
So it's all well and all like, the Australia Institute or one independent saying, we need to tax gas companies here in Australia, but now we're seeing a broad coalition. Mm-hmm. It's becoming mainstream. The ABC is paying attention to it. That is gaining traction. I think that is a net positive.
Definitely, because that will, regardless of how successful they are, that is going to push the boundaries of political discourse.
And then
the other parties will have to react in kind.
The two major parties then have to address it at least, or pretend to address it.
That's it. So there's probably a couple more we're missing out.
That was quite extensive.
Yeah, but look, there's a few other kind of interesting little cats around the side roaming around, but that's kind of the bulk of it. The election's coming up. We will be continuing to pay attention to it. I advise everyone to do your patriotic duty, register to vote, and go and vote.
And we will wrap it up at that.
Adios.
Enjoy. See ya.